You're listening to Immer Weiter. What's the most difficult thing that you've had to deal with or overcome, and how did you go about that process? The beginning of a revolution in the way we talk about mental health. Welcome everybody to the very first episode of Immer Weiter. My name is Miko Weissenberger. I am your host. In a nutshell, what we're trying to do here is have people that I consider to be kind of outliers or exceptionally successful in their field, who have kind of been through some mental difficulty, challenges, illness, maybe not, on their way there, and who are also super candid and willing to share that. And what I really hope to get out of it is that you or anyone listening finds inspiration in their kind of overcoming their story or not, or just dealing with what they are dealing with. I found myself kind of conflating success with perfection in a mental sense, and I realized that was a bit problematic. So the phrase Immer Weiter translates to always onwards, and that phrase means so much to me that I got it tattooed on my right arm here with my best friend last year after we kind of overcame some of our own personal struggles. And that's the message that we're trying to send here. So whether you're just interested in the conversation, kind of picking the brain of these standout individuals, how they view things, their values, what success means to them, or you're looking for some inspiration, you've come to the right place. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my very first guest, Matt He. Thank you so much for being on the show, man. Thank you so much for being my first. I appreciate it very much.
Mika, it is an absolute honor to be here. This is a beautiful studio in sunny, rainy Montreal. Couldn't ask for a better place.
Yeah, it's a bit of a thunderstorm here tonight, and we got the AC going because it's been absolutely ridiculously hot. If you live in Montreal, you know what we're talking about. But let's get into it, Matt. What's your story? What are you up to these days?
That is a big question to dive into. What am I up to these days? Well, look, let's do the quick rundown on my background, give everyone a bit more context on who I am.
For sure. And
perhaps why I'm here. Like you, I am a McGill student here in Montreal, finishing up my last year of studies in microbiology and immunology. As a bad Chinese kid, I ended up not doing medicine or engineering. I did microbiology and immunology and a bit of computer science, so, give the parents something there. I am currently in VC and venture capital. One-liner is I am the director of investments for Quebec for Front Row Ventures. And Front Row Ventures is Canada's first and only student-run VC fund. In Quebec here, we have a $600,000 fund where we deploy capital to the very brightest and very best student founders out there. And look, the whole concept, and I'm going to do a little sales pitch here for all you startup folks listening. The very concept of this is if you're a student like me and you're working on some crazy shit, it's not easy to find capital. Traditional VC funds don't give you the time of day. And a lot of other folks like angels who want to invest in you might not necessarily give you the full expertise you want to get out of funding. Firmo Ventures is bridging that gap. Our whole mission here is to find and invest and cultivate the brightest and best student founders out here in Quebec. Now, we're also in Ontario. We have a very separate chapter there. Very lovely folks running that as well. So to all of you, this covers a large chunk of Canada. So all you Canadian folks out there, if you're building some cool shit, reach out. Let's chat about that.
Sweet. Yeah, nice little plug there. So you're highly involved in VC and venture capital. So you're working at Front Row Ventures. You also have an internship at White Star, which is a big VC firm down in New York. But you're studying microbiology and immunology. And even though I know you super well, we've been friends for 2-3 years now. That's not even something I associate with you. I wouldn't even think, oh yeah, what's Matt studying microbiology and immunology? Because it's so different from the kind of career path that you've chosen. So why come in? I guess you might have explained it perhaps with talking about your parents, but why come in and study microbiology and immunology and then go into VC? Like, how did you bridge that gap? How did you get interested in VC?
100%, man. What I'm about to say might not be good for my future interviews, so I hope this doesn't go out there that far. But the truth is, if you ask me in a consulting interview, how did you go from microbiology to this? I'll say something about it taught me how to think like a scientist. That's what I wanted to learn from it, and then take that kind of a thinking model into the business world, which is in part true. But the truth of it is that I did not come into microbiology thinking I'm going to leverage this immediately into the business world. The plan was always finish a life science undergrad, do a either a medical degree or do some master studies in sciences when I came into university at least. And then after that, I could transition into potentially an MBA and then work for like maybe a pharmaceutical firm, something like that. That was kind of the path, with always business at the end goal for me, just because my parents are both entrepreneurs and that's what I saw growing up. Um, but it's just that I was able to realize that path in a lot shorter time, which I did not realize was even a possibility coming in, right? So I still want to stick with microbiology.
Yeah.
It is a fascinating field for me. I came in right after the Ebola crisis happened, and look where we are now with Corona, so still very relevant stuff. The framework it gets you thinking in terms of the scientific method of testing things and realizing, or at least building hypotheses and testing that, is also very useful. But long answer short, man, I fell into this to go to business way down the line, and then I got into the business world a lot sooner than I thought it would.
Okay, so I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. So, you ended up getting to business. Business was the end goal. That was the light at the end of the tunnel for you. And kind of why? Like, why? Where does this come from?
I was about to say that's the question. That's the next question you would think of, right? Why business? So, if you guys ever have the question of what does a scientist actually do? If my job title is a scientist, what does that involve? So a lot of that is lab work in a field that you're very specialized in. So typically we're talking you got a undergrad in life science, you got a master's in life science, and you're doing your PhD or postdoc even. And by the time you're there, we're talking about specializing in a field to the degree where you might be like the 0.0001% knowledge expert in the world for that one field, and you're making these small discoveries in that field that add up to be a much larger impact overall.
Yeah.
But that's from the top-down view. If you're bottom up as an individual, what it really looks like is focusing all your mental and physical energy on one or two very specific problems and getting really, really deep into that and trying to make breakthroughs where you're not even sure there are breakthroughs to be made. Now, I am definitely not qualified as a scientist. There are people way better out there to talk about this shit than I am. But from my perspective, that level of specialization and dedication to a single problem within a single field was not what I was looking for to do in life. And then the next logical question is, why not? I think this boils down to, as I said, an early childhood view of what it means to run a business, what it means to be able to drive a ship in the direction that you see fit, and being able to realize that journey. That's all really fucking cliche, what I just said. But to zoom out one level, it's to say that you get to have a larger impact in a larger field, maybe. Definitely you won't get the same benefit of being a specialist, of being the expert in something. But you do have the benefit of driving multiple people in a direction where you want to see things happen. And again, that's vague, but we can jump into what that actually means.
Yeah. Well, so you chose business then because you thought it was the career that would best allow you to leverage that ability to kind of have the most influence and change then in that sense.
Yeah, so on influence and change, and I just realized we're diving pretty deep into the science versus business thing here.
Yeah.
In science, like the influence and change you have is bring in, from my perspective at least, new knowledge and new questions to ask in certain fields. And that's great for that single field. But for that to realize into a change for a lot of people is quite difficult. You know, it's very collaborative work at the end of the day. You got to be publishing a lot of papers, working with a lot of very smart folks, very specialized folks to build those gaps, fill in something that then you have to push through the business world to see an actual, either be a commercialization or an end goal happen where you can see that have an impact. Now, not a lot of people or not everyone cares about having that impact end of the day, right? As in seeing what you do translate into benefits for other people or changes to society. But I always saw that as something really interesting to do, is asking yourself, oh, what direction can we take the world in? Or maybe a smaller geography. What direction can I take my group of folks in right now? My friends, my immediate surroundings, my school, my city. And then starting to think about driving that. And with that, this is a good transition into venture capital,
Yeah.
which is pretty much exactly that, is having the capital to back startups and companies you think that are going in the direction you see the world going into, which means placing an early capital bet on where you think the world is going and actually saying with a stamp of approval, I think this is the direction I want to take things. I think this is the right direction to take things. I think these people are capable of making the changes that we as a fund would like to see and that an overall society would take a net benefit from, which I am in a very fortunate position to be able to do.
Yeah, that's sweet. So you really kind of have a holistic end goal perspective of what you hope to achieve through venture capital, for example. Like it's really a holistically minded goal that you've set for yourself.
Absolutely. But do keep in mind, I am what you would consider the junior in this field.
Yeah, of
I have
course.
such a fresh-eyed view on this thing. I am coming with just sheer optimism and unbound possibilities, but maybe the reality of this industry is different.
I mean, I want to give you some credit because you're coming in with this sheer optimism, and you're saying you're at the junior level, which you are obviously, being the intern, but you've got to have a lot of experience with FRV, and man, the fact that you're working 80 hours a week and you have the perspective of sheer optimism, that would burn so many people out, man. Like you've kind of talked about, like, well, I mean, we've talked previously about, I mean, how that kind of levels up over time, and the how many hours you're working, but it's like it's super impressive already. Like you got to give yourself some credit there. But you made me think of a question. You started, I mean, you still are studying science, and now you're doing VC. And from my experience and from what I've learned from my peers, a lot of people that we are surrounded by are in the business school at McGill and des Hotels. And like the transition, like it's already difficult for people who are in the business school to put themselves in the business world. And coming from a different background, you must have faced kind of a more difficult time, like establishing yourself in that community. So how did you go about that? Was that difficult, or?
No, man, I wouldn't say it was difficult. I would say it was intentional, and there's a difference in that, right? You talk to most science kids who have, engineers a bit less these days because they're very highly sought after. But a lot of science people you talk to, or just people who are out of business trying to break into something like banking or consulting or even venture capital, have this idea that you got to get all these experiences that are relevant to it, get all these internships from day one, which all help, yes. But there are so many other ways to break into these industries. And I can speak mostly for VC. I don't know about the other two as much. For venture capital, I'm sure a lot of people think about it as like, oh, it makes more sense for me to come from a background that's not just finance. Because end of the day, we're talking about businesses here who are operating in a wide variety of fields. The financials that you do in a VC fund, especially like as early stage as we are at FRV, for example, there's no heavy financials to dive into. They don't exist at this stage. What you really need is a good understanding of just general business acumen, which you can develop over time, and also a solid hypothesis with backing and reasoning on where the world is headed. That's much more important. Now, take a few steps back. Why did I say this is intentional, not difficult? It's intentional in the sense that every step I've taken so far, career-wise, has been inching towards the end goal of getting deeper into VC. Best example of this would be, what did I spend two of my first McGill years on when I just got to school and just got settled in after about like a semester and a half, was building a nonprofit called Blockchain at McGill. That whole journey was inspired almost spur of the moment. Like a friend just said, hey, blockchain is huge right now. Bitcoin is massive. And this is 2017 for all you folks listening. Bitcoin was ridiculous. There was such a hype train, and McGill was just doing fuck all about it. There was nothing going on. And we were like, oh, this is an opportunity for us to do something interesting. Do some education, do some work here, maybe start an organization that can have a bit more impact than just the school and some students, maybe extend it to Montreal. And we had no clue what we were diving into. None of us were blockchain experts even, which tends to be what happens in the Bitcoin and blockchain world, by the way. It's just people have no idea what this is about diving into it, which we were. But that to me made so much sense as a step of, look, I can do this thing, build a solid community, do some real good work to do education for those who are interested in something like this, and also get my name out there, meet more people, meet people outside of my immediate peer group, meet people that I would not meet otherwise through these initiatives. And long story short, in 2 years, we went from 3 people fucking around in some person's living room to fully a 30-person team. We became a registered nonprofit. We worked with the government of Canada on hosting blockchain hackathons. We ran student certification courses. We published blockchain research reports. One just came out today. We were doing all these things, and throughout all that, everyone involved was getting exposure to people and mindsets that you will not see in school.
Yeah.
Best example of this is just when we were hosting hackathons, we were using different spaces available in Montreal, such as Notman House, and doing that, seeing back then what the Front Row Ventures team was about, getting us understanding that, oh shit, this is a possibility for me. This is something that I could realistically do in the next 6 months, 1 year. That kind of visibility and exposure is not something staying in school and doing your pure academics day in, day out will get you. You know what I mean? And I'm not bashing that. That is a path that some of my friends who I respect deeply have taken. But that is just simply not what I was looking for going in.
No, absolutely. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm not the most academic of people. I've definitely gotten involved outside of school, and I don't know. I kind of came into university with the mindset that you seem to have embraced, which is like I'm here to learn, and that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm here to learn, from my textbooks and in the class. I'm also here to learn in so many different ways. There's so many soft skills to pick up. There's so many people to meet, especially such a diversely international school at McGill. So there's really just so much to do outside of the classroom. Your tuition dollars are paying for so much more than just the classroom, and there's so much to learn outside of that. So you came in and you were super ambitious, and you're setting yourself up for a sweet career. And I'm curious to know, and we've talked about this a bit in the past over a nice steak dinner that you made me. That was delicious. How do you define success? I feel like a lot of people have the perception of finance. People it's kind of like, when is enough enough? So I kind of want to know what's important to you. How do you define success beyond your career, even within your career? Just kind of like what's important to you.
So I've broken off basically my life for the next 5 years. So I'm 21 right now, next 5 years, so 26, into 5 different categories. And for each one of those, my plan is on a yearly basis to set out very few goals, very big goals that at the end of the year, if I hit them, will take me to the place I want to be and set me up for the next year. And then I have a constant reminder every day of what those few goals are and work towards them. And the idea there is all my little actions that if I do fully and know to my gut that I've embraced it all, they will add up to accomplish those few things. And I'm happy to share what those little slices of my life are that I've chopped it up into. I was going to say in no order, but I guess in my mind I have built up, hard to say actually. I'll just list them out. Don't worry about the order. It goes wealth, health, education, pride, and love. So those are the 5 things I hold as, call them categories, call them pillars of my life that matter to me in this next sprint. The sprint of 5 years. And when I first defined them, I was looking at a 10-year outlook of saying, by the time I'm 31, if I fulfill certain things in these 5 categories, I'm in a good place. But let's just approach 5 years at a time right now. And the whole idea is that every year I'll sit down and look at myself this year and say, where am I at in life right now, and where can I go in these 5 categories to take me where I want to be? And just write it all out. It might be a page, might be 2 pages, and then just start crossing shit off. I just start crossing stuff off that might matter to me a bit, but not as much as the others. And the reason for this is, if you have a list of 20 things you want to accomplish, let's say in a year's time, and you know that those, and you rank order them from 1 to 20, the most dangerous items on that list is arguably 10 and below, or number 5 and below. Because those are the things that, while you want, will distract you from those top 5 things that you really care about. And that's what we talk about priority.
Yeah.
I see your face. You did a little
Nah, yeah,
not sure there. So let's talk about what that
for
means.
sure. Yeah, I'm a little confused.
The things that you want tend to also be the hardest things to do. Tend to be like the biggest tasks you put yourself to, or like the biggest challenges you want to overcome. Which also means, as flawed humans that we are, we will procrastinate on those the easiest because they are hard to do.
Mm.
Now, when we procrastinate, but still want to feel good about ourselves, where do we spend our time?
On the slightly less important tasks that still make us feel like we've
Exactly.
got shit done, you know?
Exactly. And if you have all those things coming out and you start spending your time on the smaller things that, sure, they'll add up to something, but not nearly as much as the first couple big things, that's how you go about, in my opinion, wasting a lot of time on the peripherals and not getting to the core. So it's a process, it's an iterative process of building, cutting down, refining, cutting down, all the way until I get to a solid 8 things, for this year at least, that I really care about and execute on.
Sweet. So, some of those might be a bit more obvious than others. So, for example, health. Like I know you're training for the Ironman or
Half Ironman.
Half Ironman. So things like that, like and wealth. There's most definitely numbers associated with that. But I'm kind of curious about pride. What does that mean? Just like having like respect for yourself or having the respect of others. What is pride? What does that mean?
Great question, man. Pride for me it has nothing to do with other people. Pride with me is all just internal. And it's weird, right? Because that on that list, career is not one of those things. I am not prioritizing pure career as a thing. And the reason for that is, and I'll dive into pride in a second, but just to explain that, I see every single opportunity I'll be taking on, everything that you can call work in the next 5-10 years as part of my education. It's part of learning. You're doing, but you're learning more than you're learning as much as you're doing, if not more. So that's where it falls in education. But pride specifically is about my responsibility to myself. And this is not just like an overall, very ephemeral thing of saying I want to feel good, but it's rather that I know in certain areas of my life to define success is going to be very hard. A good example is Front Row Ventures. How do I define success in a year's time? Do I say if I've made $100,000, $200,000 in investment that's a successful year? Do I say if everyone ends off very happy with what goes on in this year that is a success for me? Do I say that if our fund gains stability or more popularity or more traction that's success? It's hard to define, and that makes trying to define it very early on dangerous, because you might end up not driving it in the right direction just based on whatever you thought out first. And the right response to that is, but you can make it an iterative process. Absolutely. And that's part of it. But for me, pride is me saying to myself, I want to build FRV to my vision and be proud of what I build at the end of the year. And that's a gut check. And I know this is a common human experience. I think everyone out there knows when they've actually done something to their full capacity. That's what this is about. Is saying, I have given this everything I have. I have iterated. I have found these different milestones that we can hit to get there. All these things then fall under the umbrella of saying, by the end of this year, I want to know that I have given my damn all to building this organization to the best place it can be. And that's what pride to me is about. And I have pride in different areas of my life, right? And so Front Row Ventures is a great example. Another good example is what we're doing at Delta Kappa Epsilon, the fraternity Mika and I are both a part of. I have something there I want to do to my full proudness as well. Because there's seldom other things that I can use to metrically define it without losing that holistic view of what we're trying to get done.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something I think about all the time is kind of, especially in the last 2 years or so, it's become a much bigger conversation around kind of like self-care and whatnot, right? And I kind of, it's confusing because you, like, obviously you need to take care of yourself and you need to look out for yourself. But for me, it's so hard to find the line, for example, between self-care, like looking out for yourself, cutting yourself off when you need to, when you know you've got a difficult kind of task, or you need that day of a break or whatever it may be, taking time for yourself and prioritizing yourself over something else. versus pushing yourself as hard as you can to reach your goals, right? That's something that I kind of want your opinion on is how do you, like, if you don't reach those goals, those, let's say those 8 goals that you set out for yourself, does that, like, how do you handle that relationship with yourself? Like, how do you process that? I guess those are kind of two different questions, but what's the line between taking care of yourself and pushing yourself? And if you don't hit those goals, what do you do?
Well, Mika, I want to hear your thoughts on that. What do you think? What's the balance?
I I don't know. Sometimes, and you're obviously a hyper. I mean, you're working 8 hours a week. It's fucking insane. You're obviously hyper focused on those 8 goals. Not like you're laughing because I know you think that's not insane, but that's fucking crazy, man. Like 80 hours a week is more than 99% of the Western world's population. Um, it's difficult because there's a lot of things that I want to do and a lot of goals I set out for myself. Like with this podcast, and I see it becoming a lot more than a podcast. I see it becoming kind of a brand that takes on a lot of mental health initiative. And you know how I started this. I came to you first. I was like, I want to I want to do a clothing line. I want to do an app. And you were like, hold up, before you dive into this shit, you spend a lot of time and money on app. See if there's a demographic of people that fuck with this message first. And so there's a lot of things that I want to do. So in my sense, I take it day to day, I think similarly to how you do, which is I want to make sure I've done the best like that I absolutely can. And I have like different areas of my life that I prioritize for like different. I don't think about it usually in terms of like all these different kind of like health, wealth. I usually just have, okay, this is something I want to do. For example, I want to like be at this level in French. And I'm just gonna work at that level every day, or I'm gonna, I write down my tasks that I have to do for this podcast every day and whatnot. But it's more of a, if I'm sometimes feeling overwhelmed, like I will take a day or I will take a few hours and just like watch a movie, skip my workout. Like as long as I've been on my shit 95% of the time, sometimes I do give myself like that break, and it's something that I've very recently come to terms with, and I think I still am, is not feeling guilty about taking that time. So I'm kind of I am more in favor of kind of the narrative that has been talked about on social media and in general for the last 2 years, which is if you need to take time for yourself, take time for yourself. Like your relationship with yourself is super important, and you're also very unlikely to be productive in a meaningful way in what's important to you in your pursuits if you're not feeling good about where you are, if you're not taking the time to take care of yourself.
It's a great mindset, man. I'd say there's a weird thought bubble around what self care is. It's like, oh, do all these nice things for yourself as like a little reward, or like, you know, if you're on your shit 95% of the time, take some time off and
Yeah.
mellow yourself out, get your mind in the right place. But I feel like self care is actually like the critical part of getting the things you want done in life. Why? Let's use like a race car as an analogy. The best performing race cars, you got to fine tune that shit.
Well oiled and whatnot.
Often you got to oil it, you got to repair it, you got to swap out tires, you got to make sure everything's going constantly, right? And that's actually the critical work. That's the work you can't skip if you want to drive fast and drive for a long time and let that car survive. Same thing with a horse, right? You can ride a horse fast for a while before it fucking dies, or you can carefully feed the horse, let it rest, give it water, give it all the good stuff it needs, and that horse is going to take you far. Same thing. Your body, your mind, your just you as a person. That self-care side really is like the refueling and part of the whole idea of reaching wherever you want to reach. Know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's, to be honest, I did not expect you to have that answer. Like the impression that I have of you is like this really hard ass go-getter who's like, fuck watching Netflix and eating ice cream one night a week. Like I'm gonna kill myself trying to get to where I want to be. And I'm not saying obviously the impression isn't accurate, but I think the fact that that is the impression I have is a reflection of a lot of the pressure that people feel, because I look at people in my life who are going above and beyond, and like I have you on the show because I think you're fucking killing it, and you are. Like the shit that you're doing is really amazing. And so I look at you and I'm like, man, this guy doesn't rest. And then I'm like, fuck, I feel like I can't rest. And then I feel like then that comes into like the guilt towards taking that time for yourself, right? So it's really, and that's literally, not to plug the podcast that you are listening to right now, but that is why I'm doing this, is because I want to try to understand the mindset of successful people. Because before we had this conversation, despite knowing you for 3 years, I would not have thought that you would have been like, yeah, you got to take care of yourself, and you got to I wouldn't have thought that you would have said that, because I thought you were like that always on type of person. And that's like reflective of, like I said, that comes back to my perception of you influences what I think I'm doing and how I judge that, you know?
Yeah, man. I feel like what you just said is, it's easy to look at the people that are doing crazy in life and think that they're just absolute fucking machines. That they're just grinding it out. They're perfect. They can get 100% of what they want done every day. The whole halo effect around people.
Yeah.
And I feel like it really takes you trying to live that lifestyle yourself and trying to live in that image for a long time and cracking under it before realizing that nobody can do that. Yeah. You know, even the most craziest productive people out there, it's one of two things. Either you're like maintaining 100% for short bursts and then burning out for a long period. Yeah. Or you're maintaining that steady burn that you can sustain. And steady burn could look like 5 days 100%, 2 days at like 10%. Yeah. Some people do that. Steady burn could be every day, 7 days a week, 365 days a day, 365 days a year at like 80%. All these are arbitrary. Point is, there was a period in my life where I was going for like 8 months straight on 5 hours of sleep at night, just running on caffeine and caffeine pills, and just burning my mind off in work. Yeah. Right.
Because you thought you had to. Because you
I saw other people who were
doing it, and you thought you had to do
that. I thought other people, and I thought that's what they did. Yeah. That's the important thing, is that I did not actually know what they were doing. Yeah. But I knew the image they gave off and the impression they gave off was, I am an absolute fucking machine.
You want to put up the mic a little bit? I want to you're kind of talking to the top of the... There you go. Perfect. Yeah.
That I'm an absolute fucking machine, that I can do whatever I want done. And that lack of sleep doesn't bother me. Extreme exhaustion doesn't bother me. Feeling like I'm about to crack does not bother me. Because that's what other people might seem like sometimes. But you gotta see, like, that's all an illusion, and that's not on them. That's on you. That's how you fucking perceive them. Rarely do you see anyone who asks to be perceived that way. Nobody wants to be seen as a machine. Everyone's a person, you know? They want to see the human side of shit. But it's when you put someone on that pedestal of, oh, look at them, they're so perfect, they're running like a well-oiled machine. Do you all of a sudden feel that pressure that does not even actually exist of, you got to burn yourself the hell out while still performing as a top 1%. That's a mindset that will set you up to fail in the long run. Maybe in the short run. Maybe if you have something to do in the next 1 week, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, you might be able to pull that off. But the cost at which you will do that is so high that why? Unless you have a very good reason for that, I think it's something to see immediately, that the way you see other people is a complete reflection of yourself.
Yeah. And I mean, because you see that shit with like Elon Musk, for example, like as one of many examples. He's like, I fucking sleep in the factory. Like I'm always working. I'm never doing anything else. And so I feel like a lot of people feel that pressure to be as productive as that. And definitely the steady burn over a longer period of time is much more productive than like a hyper-focused 2-week, 3-month binge of just extreme productivity, and then like the burnout and the mental hardship that follows that. Steady burn, it's also like, I think it's worth mentioning, because people are like, fuck, well, if I'm more productive in this like hyper-focused state, then I feel like people would be willing to sacrifice some of their mental health and physical health to like get that done. But the steady burn is more productive over the long run. So I'm kind of curious, are you struggling with the pop filter there?
I am.
Yeah, that thing was giving me a lot of problems during setup. Maybe
go ahead, don't worry.
So basically, I'm kind of curious, because I don't actually know. You're just holding the pop filter here. Try like screwing the bit to the...
Don't worry about me.
Okay. All right. At the end of the day, you can just take it off if you want to, the pop filter. Or you just like put it all the way down. Maybe that'll help.
Don't worry about me.
All right.
Guys, this
But-
is part of running a podcast. You got
Yeah, you gotta
technical difficulties.
you
Bear
gotta-
with me.
you gotta power through. But so what I wanted to kind of know, just kind of a more surface level question after we've dug a bit deeper there. What how do you take care of yourself? Like if you're feeling like you need a break, or is that how you do? You're just like, you work intensely for a period of time, and you're like, you can feel that you are starting to be less sharp and you're a bit fatigued, and you're like, okay, I need to take a break. Is that how you do it, or do you plan it, or like, I'm just kind of curious, like how do you take care of yourself?
I think what's important is to first recognize the place I'm at right now, and it's the work that I do thoroughly enjoy. So it's not like, and I know a few people in my life that do this, they do like a 40-hour work week, 50-hour work week, where they don't really like the work, and they feel like this is me just spending 50 hours of my life to be something I really dislike.
Yeah.
And it's miserable, or that I just thoroughly don't enjoy spending my time this way. So for
That's
them,
true.
every single hour of those 50 hours is just sheer burning them, right? Versus I've gotten myself to a place where I do thoroughly enjoy that 80-hour work I do, which is why for me it doesn't seem, and I really don't think it is like outrageous or even that outstanding in terms of like sheer number of hours put in. For me, it's like that's the amount of time I need to spend to get my shit done. If I could do it quicker, sure, I'd love to be more efficient and get more stuff done in the same time.
Yeah.
But that's where I'm at right now. So first off, I'm not burning myself out in this time I'm putting into my work. I'm not burning myself out at a higher rate, I guess would be the better phrasing. But in terms of, definitely there are times where my head is just like, nope, not going to do this. Or my body is just like, come on, man, you are gone. A couple of things that I do to really like take my head out of stuff. I think the biggest one that helps me the most is getting out of the city.
Really?
Like whenever I'm in a place where, and this is like a sustained period of like 2-3 weeks of just like, head feels clouded, can't think straight. Just getting out of the city, being in the woods for a bit helps so much. I don't know why. Maybe just being under the stars.
I mean, it's just such a polar opposite to your
Yeah,
normal
just
day-to-day
having
life,
that
so it
quiet
makes sense.
time, even if just driving silently helps. Just being outside, being in motion, and being able to have that background processing noise. That's something that people, I don't think, make a lot of time for, is that background processing, right?
Like that
You
kind of
gotta-
subconscious
Yeah,
filtering and
you
whatnot.
got a lot of front-end processing. I'm on my phone, I'm answering messages, I'm answering emails, I'm looking at posts, I'm interacting with people online. But you need that subliminal burn every now and then to really get some of the deeper questions that you're not even aware of that's bothering you answered. So, a lot of people are saying, oh, I'm a student, I can't get out of the city whenever I want. Same. My driver's license just expired, so that doesn't help my fucking case now, does it? So my second best thing for clearing my head is going for a nice long run, which helps me as well since I'm doing this whole half Ironman thing. So whenever I have the time and the luxury of doing it, I go out for a long run. That clears my head in the way where I literally cannot be looking at my phone. I literally cannot be working during this time.
Yeah, so you have a single kind of focus.
I'm in a singular focus. I am completely in tune with my body. That's what matters so much. And here's the funny thing, is the best runs I have are when I am no longer aware that I'm running, where my consciousness is in that whatever pool of subconscious thoughts there is and just processing stuff in the background. That's the times where I can go fucking 10 miles and not even realizing it. And just having other thoughts flow in my body, and I'm just moving forward. And after something like that, I gain so much more clarity. It feels like a weight off my shoulders. That's the second thing I do. A third thing I do is just call it's a brain dump. And if you haven't heard of this before,
I haven't.
your mind is not really meant to store tasks. It is not optimal for that.
What do you mean store tasks?
Like
Think of things that I have to do.
I
or
need
what
to
do you mean?
send my friend a
Okay.
birthday card. I need to go to the grocery for XYZ. I need to send this email back to a founder. Because if you're storing all this shit, you know how memory works is you got to recall it for it to keep on sustaining, right?
Yeah.
That's why like Anki systems work. Which basically means you got a jumble of a few things that you're constantly recalling throughout the day that's going to bother you, and you're going to forget stuff. So if I really feel like my head's clouded, I just do a brain dump. I just list every single thing I know I got to do out on paper, schedule them into my calendar somewhere, and I know I don't need to worry about that anymore. Just whenever that time comes, it says on my calendar I got to do XYZ. And my brain is free to clear and have that subconscious processing. So all this is going around giving yourself time for that subconscious processing. A fourth thing that I've recently gotten into is playing a casual game of Team Fortress 2. It is just such a silly and like mindless thing that you can do, or playing like Dark Souls 3 with a buddy and just chatting and talking shit, like the
Yeah.
normal people stuff that
Yeah, of
you
course.
do to
Yeah,
relax.
you're not a robot.
And why?
Yeah.
Because it helps your subconscious thoughts have some time just to float onto the surface and do what it needs to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's a really good rundown. You're fucking articulate. I don't know if I could have answered that question as well as you. I would say my thing, which is probably I share with most of the human population, would just be spending time with people that I really care about. Um, but
Oh
that's
wait, I did not mention this, but
yeah, you're just like fuck people. I do everything by myself.
yeah, wow.
No,
I
I
guess,
mean,
I guess that's because
yeah.
like subconscious processing for me is all about like being alone and or like
Yeah,
in relative solitude and having some sort of like space for that.
yeah.
Also spending time with my girlfriend,
That's totally
spending
fair.
time with the fucking boys, even just like taking on calls with friends I haven't seen in a while.
Yeah, quarantine's been good for that. I've reconnected
Oh yeah.
with some people. I'm pretty shitty at answering some messages, not gonna lie, but some people I do keep in touch with, like an old friend from California before I moved to Canada. But what I found interesting there was you were talking about a brain dump. So you called it a brain dump, but I just call that like planning, like scheduling kind of shit that you have to do. Like an ex-girlfriend of mine gifted me this like weekly planner, and there's just kind of like a rectangular block for every day. And I began for the first couple months I didn't use it, and then after that I started like dividing it into three sections, which is like personal, admin, and school. And now that it's summer and I'm not doing school, it's just personal, admin, and even like the most simple things I just like that I want to do, I add on there. And what I've noticed is after a while they become a habit, and then I don't even like subconsciously I just stop writing them down because I just do them anyway. But like planning and literally just using Google Calendar is fucking incredible. That is a yeah, that's fair. I don't like I wouldn't have defined that as self-care, as more of like kind of like planning and shit. But
So right out of there, if I just say, "Oh, you got to plan your day," that's not a lot. That's not a lot of insight.
Yeah,
But I'll dive just one layer deeper into what that actually means.
sure.
So not just planning, not just saying I got to do this thing, especially with complicated projects where you're given like a unstructured task, you got to figure out exactly how you're gonna execute on that.
Yeah.
Planning is not saying I'm gonna figure that out and how to do it.
Okay, so you're not
future time.
breaking it down like I'm doing this today, I'm doing this tomorrow. You're just like, this is all the shit that like I
I
need
first
to get
list
done.
all the shit I need to do, schedule in what are individual tasks that I know can be done in like a discrete period of time,
Mhm.
and for everything that I know can't be done in like 4 hours, 8 hours, 'cause I don't know how big the task scope is going to be. Brain dumping is about me sitting down and breaking that down into all the individual tasks that it takes to get there.
Yeah.
And I can assign a time value to each. And that gives me the comfort of mind of knowing I know exactly how many hours I need to spend on all these things
Yeah.
in order to clear them all off my plate.
Simply just knowing what you have to do. I was just talking shit about Elon Musk, but I think once he said, if you're stressed, it's because you're not doing, or maybe it was Jeff Bezos, I don't know, is if you're stressed, it's because you're not doing the things that you know you should be doing. And I've had a lot of problems with sleep, and I've run through kind of the CBT insomnia protocol and talk to people about it. And one of the big things is like if you're in bed thinking about things that you need to do, just get out of bed, write it down, and then it kind of literally like exits your brain. It's on the paper, and then you can go back to bed and be like, okay, like I'm gonna take care of that at a future date. So that's kind of
I sleep like a baby.
I really
I
don't, man.
hit the bed, 5 minutes, I'm out.
But I feel like and I find that more as I'm working more on the podcast and as I'm starting working this summer as well. If you're not, I find that if I don't sleep, which I haven't been sleeping well for quite a while, but if it's because I haven't had the most full day I could have had in a kind of full circle kind of way, how you're talking about your goals are basically just like pushing that as hard as you can and giving it your all. If I haven't given it my all that day, whether that be with a workout, my work, podcast, etc., then like I don't sleep well because I'm anxious about maybe shit that I haven't done or whatnot. So that's I don't know, it's kind of interesting. But another thing that I kind of wanted to ask you, so and this is kind of related to self-care. So when you have those moments, because you said it a couple minutes ago, when you have those moments when you're like, shit, like my brain is done, I can't do this anymore. How do you make that decision whether or not to stop what you're doing or to continue? Like, obviously, if it's something super urgent, like you don't have a choice, but like, how do you stop doing what you're doing, what you know that you need to do, and not feel like guilty about it? It's a very specific question, but like, how do you afford yourself? Like, and I might even have an answer for you. It's because you know that you're giving it your all 99% of the time. So you're like, okay, if I can't do it now, I can't do it now, and that's fair. So, like, but how would you handle that?
I think that's a great direction you took it. For me, it's if I know the work I'm about to put out is going to be garbage compared to what I can do if I'm well rested or just like in a better state of mind, that's when I'm like, all right, find some way to get yourself in that state. As you said, if it's not urgent. If it's urgent, it's like a fuck or die situation. Just do it, right?
Yeah.
If it's not urgent,
Fuck or die situation.
fuck or die, man. I love that so much.
Dude, where'd you get that from?
I have no
Did you make that up?
I have no clue. I definitely did not make that up. Someone else said that, but I've taken it into my vocabulary. But yeah, it's like, I want to deliver good work to myself, to the people I'm responsible for, to the people I'm responsible to. I want to deliver good work. If I know what I'm about to do is going to be garbage and it's just going to be passing something off for the sake of doing it, I'll find a way to take some time off and reschedule that block of time and work into some other day. That's the simplest answer. And the reason I don't feel guilty about that is that allows me to produce better work. Like, we're talking again, we're refueling the car so we can drive super fast.
For sure. All right. I've kind of saved this for a bit later in the podcast. We're going to go fucking deep. Are you ready, Matt?
Is when you ask me out?
Yeah, I mean, you're looking real good behind that pop filter. That new haircut, you're looking great. What's the most difficult thing that you've had to deal with or overcome, and how did you go about that process? Let's say at McGill. I'll narrow it down. That's a loaded fucking question. So take your time if you need to.
Yeah, man. That's like
I can cut your mic until when you
don't
start.
need to come up. I'm just saying, man. Like, you're asking me a big question right off the bat.
Well, I mean, it's been half an hour. But I wanna go deep. Like, you're very successful in what you've been doing so far, and
I mean, if we talk about
it as well,
the most difficult thing I've had to deal with
that you're willing to share, of course,
and overcome through McGill.
Or what's okay? I can rephrase the question. If I mean, difficult thing that's that.
No,
be a
it's
question.
fine. You don't need to rephrase it. I need to think, right?
No worries. Or also, yeah. All right, go ahead.
I was gonna jump in and say the answer is relationships, as in my relationship with myself, and and more importantly, my relationship with other people. And what that second one, which is the much more important one to me, means is that when I first came into university, I was at this place in my life where people, like the relationships I had in my life, were important to me as a reflection of myself. As in, the way other people reacted to how I was my validation, was my signal that I needed to change X, Y, or Z, was my signal that I was on the right path. And bonding and forming real relationships with people while you're using them as a mirror is impossible. Because what you're trying to do is build that relationship that you want to see with them, which is a visage. It's an illusion. It's what you have in your mind. It's not what's real. That for me was a challenge for quite a while, and it got me to the place where I was having panic attacks trying to hold up an image that I didn't know, that I knew was just an image. And I didn't even fucking know what panic attacks were. I thought I was having heart issues. So I went to see my doctor. She's like, "You're fine. You're a kid. You don't have heart issues. You're having panic attacks." And I remember the worst case was I was driving on the 401 in Ontario, and all of a sudden I just knew I'm going to fucking die. And it was not even like a question. It was like, yep, I'm dying. I am going to die. My heart rate was accelerating. I was on the highway at a pull-off. And while I kind of have a memory of what happened then, I remember like going to this curb, walking onto the sidewalk, and just kind of like sitting down, and the world was spinning. I don't know how I got home. I knew I drove that car home somehow. I knew I got home and I survived. Not survived. Nothing happened, obviously, but it
But
was
you
just like
felt
a
like you
memory. It
survived.
was just like a memory blackout, basically. It's the weirdest fucking thing as well, because I still didn't fully accept what a panic attack was. It was like the weirdest concept to me. Point is, got myself a therapist. Talked it out. Got 4 sessions, real clean done, and that just helped me straighten out a lot of this stuff and really realize how I was not building relationships, but just using other people to validate my own image. Which is pretty sociopathic. It's fucking awful. It's a not a good thing to do. It's not a good way to live. So, first, getting over that, and starting to have relationships where you're there for the person,
Yeah.
not for the person's reflection of you.
So
That was important.
when you say a person's reflection of you, that means like how they make you feel or how they validate like the choices that you make, or like would you mind being like a bit more specific about? First of all, thank you so much for being like
Oh, for
fucking
sure.
like incredibly candid about that. It's, like that's obviously a difficult thing to struggle with, and like that's just thank you so much for sharing that. That's really profound, genuinely. But yeah, so when you say mirror, you mean like that, like them validating what you're doing, or even just
Exactly.
saying nice things about you. Like, what do you mean by mirror?
Exactly that. I had an image of what I wanted to be perceived as
Yeah.
coming into university, because uh be it all through high school, be it all through like my previous life, I just felt that I wasn't living up to the person I wanted to be. So I was so desperate to get any inkling of I was going in that right direction. Any sort of approval or validation, that I just structured my whole life around that, and all my actions were around getting to that certain image. And that's a really tiring way to live, because you do not control how others perceive you. You might be able to influence, generally in which direction they think, what kind of person you are. But end of the day, you will never actually really know what people think of you either. What you think others perceive you as is more a reflection of how you perceive yourself. So spending a lot of time chasing that and building a persona that really wasn't me, or wasn't a person. It was just that. It was a persona. And that's not an easy thing to live in and day out. It's fucking miserable when you always are second guessing whether or not you should say something or how you should phrase something specifically. Even going down to typing a message out, deleting it, retyping it out 10 times to get that perfect phrasing. That kind of small stuff can drive you insane.
Yeah, that wears you down.
And, it took a while to get to a point to be comfortable with yourself as a person, and be comfortable with just presenting yourself as what you genuinely think you are to everyone else, and letting the consequences flow. And the consequences are, some people will just, not like it. And that's fine. That's fine. There's a lot of people out there.
Can't please everyone.
What's that?
Can't please everyone.
If you're pleasing everyone, you're pleasing no one, man. Some people will love it. And that's where I think the beauty is once you're okay with that, and you realize just how many people are out there, you can really start finding your people, the people that, get you,
Yeah.
and that you get.
I completely feel that, man. Like obviously we're involved in fraternity, so there's a lot of people around us, both directly fraternity brothers or like our network, and you really start to form like a close kind of circle of people. And I used to kind of feel bad about that, like, okay, I hang out more with these 3-4 people than others, but I'm like, I mean, that's a reflection of shared values or like a special kind of compatibility that have these people, and that's not a bad thing. Being more kind of not selective, but okay with not pleasing everyone, and accepting that not everyone's going to like you, and also that you don't have to like everyone, is super important. So you said you had that panic attack kind of in the car. Was that the moment where you were like, okay, shit, I need to do something about this, or was it later?
That was one of those moments. But as we're speaking here right now, I'm having this internal dialogue with myself, because I know what I'm saying right now is what you would call an acceptable answer for what you're looking for here, right?
Yeah.
as in like it's solid. We're talking about something that's relevant to the podcast and the whole theme of this.
For sure.
Uh, but just like any procrastinator knows, the thing that stresses you out the most is the thing that you should be doing the most.
Yeah.
And right now, the thing that's stressing me the most to talk about, and you know exactly where I'm going with this because we've talked about this before, is an addiction I've been trying to beat for fucking a better part 6 years of my life now, right? Jesus Christ, yeah.
You don't have to be specific if you don't want to.
Whatever
Whatever you feel comfortable with. So no stress.
Well, no, it's like we talk about being candid and all that, but that's all fucking bullshit if I'm not actually able to be candid and just sharing what I consider passable answers for the sake of avoiding a topic that I think is could be potentially damaging to me. It could be potentially hard for me to talk about. Could be embarrassing to talk about. But the truth is, if you don't talk about the shit, if nobody talks about the shit, it's hard for people to understand that these are real issues.
And it's hard for people who might be struggling with similar things to feel like they should be speaking up about it as well.
Yeah, and it took me a long time. And, see, I've said this much without even actually mentioning what it was.
Yeah.
I'm getting fucking tingles in my fingertips because it's nerve-wracking. But this is a moment where I'm just fully in flow right now. And that's the crazy thing is I can feel it. And this addiction I've been trying to overcome for fucking 6 years is a porn addiction. And it is just a complete nightmare. It is, I think, one of the craziest things, right? It is one of the few addictions where there's no natural consumption limit. If I'm a coke addict, I can only take so much coke before my heart fucking gives up. If I'm an alcoholic, I can only drink so much before I die, right? If I'm a workaholic, I will work myself to death at some point. Like we're talking real addicts here. If I'm a food addict with a eating disorder in that range, I will get myself to a point where my body can no longer sustain all that weight. But porn addiction is one of those things where there is no natural consumption limit. You can keep going and spend a lifetime with something like that. And the fact is, I don't know if this is surprising to people, but many people do. What was it? A couple years ago, they tried to do a study of what porn does to people, to men specifically, and they were trying to recruit any guy above the age of 18 who haven't consumed porn in like a bunch of different universities, and they couldn't find a single fucking person for the study.
Jesus.
They couldn't find a sample size large enough. It's just like so pervasive.
Yeah.
I mean, it's part of the conversation now. Sex positivity, sex worker rights, porn actresses and actors are also sex workers, and there's this whole wave of empowerment with it, and this whole wave of this is healthy, this is part of sex life and relationships, this is part of your natural urges and what your body wants. And I can't speak for the masses. I can't speak for the majority of people out there. I'm sure there are people who have regulated usage and have a healthy relationship with it. But for people like me, and I say that because I know there is such a large amount of people struggling with this, and it blows my mind that I only learned that I was not alone in this until like the last year. For someone like me who first saw porn when I was like 9 or 10 through some classmate, and then used it as a place for me to run away from all of my life's problems. Stress, rejection, anxiety, self-confidence issues. Anything I knew I could always get that dopamine rush. It was like a guaranteed hit, And it was a hit that I could get almost virtually anywhere. It was a hit that I could get and almost keep it a complete secret. No one else would know. And even if someone else would know about it, it was so normalized that it's just something you could say, oh, well, everyone uses it.
It's hard to identify as a problem if you're not aware of how serious it is.
And a lot of people still don't think it's an actual problem. Some people would say, oh, well, you don't have a porn addiction. You might have an addiction to someone else, or maybe you just have a bit of an unhealthy usage issue. And sure, that's one way to categorize it. But in my head and what I know and from all these things I've read, and I've read a lot about this, because when you first tackle a problem, the first thing you do is like soak up all the knowledge you got that's out there. This is something that fundamentally rewires you as a person. This is something that fucks with how your brain is wired. This is something that fucks with actually the chemical receptors in your brain. And this is something that is a supernatural stimulus. And what is that? That is basically anything that takes advantage of a natural desire of our mammalian, of our fucking biological wiring that would never exist out there in nature for a million years. You know, things like, let's see, what's a great example of this? Those high fatty foods, or those, like, I think chips and Doritos are a great example. You got that perfect combination of the oiliness and the carbs, and it just hits you just right. You know, or candy, because you got all that sweetness that your
Your
body
body's
just
like
craves for.
biologically like, ooh, nutrition, but
Yeah,
it's
we're still
just,
cavemen, man.
yeah.
We're still cavemen in our bodies. That's the crazy thing. We got caveman bodies. We got reptilian parts of our brain. We're still very primitive on a physical standpoint. But there are people out there who realized, hey, if I make this burger just a bit greasier and just a bit juicier, it's gonna sell better. If I make this beverage just a bit more sugary, people are gonna get more addicted to it. People are gonna like it and come back more, and that's gonna make me more money, and that's good. And shit, oh no, there's no regulations around this stuff. Well, how about I fund the money to regulate it so that whatever I do is okay? And that's what has happened with the food industry, for example. You've gotten to a point where we're eating ridiculous stuff, and people consider that okay. You know, same thing with sugary beverages. I think that's just the easy example. If you're a caveman, when are you consuming 74 grams of sugar in a day? How many berries do you have to eat for that? There's not that many berries in your little patch of land.
Over the course of a month, basically.
Basically, that's, if a caveman gets like 10 grams of sugar a day, that's a fucking happy caveman. And that's our bodies, So, going back to the whole thing of porn, how is that a supernatural stimulus? And normally in a lifetime, how many partners are you going to really have?
I think the average is like, isn't it
6, 9?
Yeah,
I don't know.
something like that. 7.
A
8.
low amount. The times you get to see somebody that you consider attractive in a sexual context is low, and throughout an entire human lifetime. But now we've made it on demand, on internet, high speed, whatever gets you off, you can see. Anytime. Any day. It's just a fingertip and a search away. Right? It used to be photos, and then magazines, and then DVDs came out. All that was still an era of I have to consciously go somewhere and bother myself to get that stuff,
Yeah.
But now, internet, 4G, you
Yeah,
can be
I
fucking
guess-
anywhere.
I guess with modernization in the last, I mean, you could say in the 20th and in the 21st century, you really, really have to fight kind of your natural desires in so many senses, whether it be with your relationship with sex and porn or
Yeah,
food.
man.
Like, you really have to have, I think, discipline in the last 150 years has been more important than ever. Back in the day, it was kind of like you had to do this, that, and the other thing, otherwise you're fucked. Now it's like you have so many options, especially speaking from a very privileged position in the Western world. Like, you can kind of do whatever the fuck you want. So if you're irresponsible with your human kind of desires, there's just so many avenues to kind of to ruin, which sounds super depressing, but I kind of and once again, dude, I really appreciate you being candid about that. Like, that's exactly why we're doing this. How's the process been for you to work? I don't want to say overcome, because I don't want to like establish a context of like, oh, like I've like beaten this, but like how are you working through it? How do you live with it?
I think it's a matter of what your relationship with it is, And I think for the people that have a healthy relationship with it, it's a simple mental thing for them, or it's just like, oh, every now and then, I enjoy this. It takes my mind off everything else, and I get to like escape for a little bit. But they don't use it as a crutch. And once you start using something as a crutch, that's when it becomes dangerous, because you're dependent. Addiction doesn't form when you use something once or twice, when you just try something. Even the most addicting, let's talk cocaine, even if you do cocaine once or twice, you're not addicted to it. But it's when you start going back to it over and over, because it helps you with something that otherwise you can overcome through a very laborious process, in the moment and helps you with something. As in, right now, in this moment, I feel like shit. I know if I use porn, I can take my mind off for the next half hour, 1 hour, 2 hours off of whatever it is that's making me feel like crap. And there are days where that just seems like the best way out. It's like, fuck, man, I just want to take some time off and get my head out of this shit. But then there are other days where you have that clarity of you can't go on like this. This is not a real solution. It's not actually a real crutch. You're not fixing anything. You're just temporarily delaying whatever you have to fix into the future and potentially causing more problems in that delay process. And the crazy thing is, everyone who is suffering from this problem knows this. This is not news to anyone. Everyone knows. Everyone who has this problem knows that this is an issue, and that the more they use, the deeper of a hole they dig themselves into. But that's where the fucking mind game aspect of this comes in, is that, it's almost become a joke that kids just get exposed to porn way earlier than what is legal, It's a joke that the fucking verification thing is, are you 18 or above?
What's your birthday? Yeah.
Click, and I'm in.
Yeah.
There is no real regulation. And again, it's because these corporations, these people who have an incentive to see worldwide usage of this, were able to set these regulations up themselves. It's a bit fucked up if you ask me, but, that's how business is. But on the whole idea of knowing it's a problem and continue to use and dig yourself into a hole deeper and deeper, I think that's actually the part that kills you. It's not necessarily using it or the time that's spent on it, because some people are able to do that and it's just fine. It fits as part of their life. But it's once you know that you're not supposed to be doing this, and yet you still realize that you're going back to it over and over again, be it out of weakness, be it out of just, it's the most comforting thing you have in the moment, be it out of just boredom even. When you know you're not supposed to be doing something and you keep on going back to it, that's when this becomes dangerous. That's when this starts rotting away something deep inside you that I cannot describe. But it starts slowly eating away that aspect of you to the point where you start questioning your ability to do anything at all.
Damn, that's some heavy shit. Would you say that the discipline that you are required to display or use in kind of controlling your addiction, would you say that has maybe spilled over into other areas of your life and helped you kind of been more principled or disciplined in other areas? Or would you say it's kind of, because there's the concept of like willpower is finite. I mean, we've all heard it. You can only make so many good decisions a day, right, before you start making poor decisions. And so like if you think of it as like a power bar of willpower, you would think that the discipline to control that addiction takes up a significant amount of that power bar. So I'm kind of wondering, on a bit of an aside, like, does controlling yourself to not engage with your addiction, does that either allow you to be more disciplined in other areas of your life, or does that kind of take away from that power bar and make other things more difficult?
So let's talk about the power bar. I fundamentally don't agree with that concept.
Fair.
I'm sure like all the studies that show that you have a certain amount of willpower, that if you make hard decisions, it's harder for you to resist some like sugary treat at the end of the day. Yeah. Those are all completely valid. I'm sure that the studies have to prove this stuff. But the whole idea that the power bar is the way to go about life, for me, is a bit ridiculous.
Yeah, thinking that you have a limit kind of to your willpower is...
Well, it's like if every decision you make, you have to be like, how much willpower is this draining? It's hard to live, right? So for me, and for a lot of people, it's about setting up habits where you're engaged in automatic loops that get you where you want to go, or reducing friction to get stuff done. So great example is, let's say I want to lose weight. What's the first thing I do? I just throw away all the stuff that I know in my pantry that is garbage for me. Why? Because if they're in my pantry, how easy is it for me to
just grab it and snack on it?
So easy.
Yeah.
That's step number one. Step number two is just going grocery shopping and changing up the route I walk in the grocery store, And then telling myself, if I ate all this stuff in my cart right now, would I feel like garbage? If the answer is yes, I start taking things out. So it's all about setting up these little habits that requires very little like actual motivation at the time of making them, and it's like at discrete moments. Once a week, I have to make a decision of what I buy. at the grocery store. Not every day. And once I make that decision, I go home and I'm hungry and I open up my fridge. All I have are eggs, celery, almond milk. There's not that much to
And
think
you're not
about.
gonna go out and grab more shit, so you're
Yeah,
stuck with what you got.
exactly. And that, so you see what I'm talking about here? Is you're setting yourself up for success with this stuff. Same thing with porn addiction. How do I set myself up for success to avoid that? Well, look, there's this app, this community called Fortify. For anyone who is struggling with something like this, I cannot recommend this more. It is there are guided resources in a community that shows you are far from alone in this issue. There's so many people out there, and you would be surprised who is out there that struggles with this kind of stuff. Uh, and in part is because everyone has an incentive to keep it secret. It is just what you can't stop yourself watching porn. Just turn off the computer. How is that a real thing? It's the easiest problem that is a real problem to get made fun of, or to feel threatened with your professional career with, because it's an embarrassing thing to admit for a lot of people. It's a scary thing to admit. You don't know how other people will perceive it, and I didn't know how other people would perceive it. And thanks to in part Fortify for showing me there's such a community out there of not who you think would have this problem. I was surprised. Common thing with doctors, common things with people with these high stress
High
positions.
octane careers, kind of.
And I can imagine when you're in a high octane position like that, you're gonna want every now and then have an ability to shut your mind off. But it's when you start using that as the crutch to shut your mind off, do you fall into this dangerous habit loop. So, Fortify has taught me all these, and it's got this component which is daily tracking. So every day, and I've been doing this for about 8 months straight now. I go through a little questionnaire it provides, asking me the things how I felt, if I used or not, how did I go through my day, and a brief recap on just my entire day flow, almost like a journal. And I start getting an awareness of when I'm most susceptible to using this stuff. And there are patterns to this. Again, you people, humans, we are animals of habit. If you grew up having a habit of playing video games, getting bored, browsing internet, and using porn, then that becomes a habit loop. And the next time you open a video game, you're very likely to fall into that habit loop. And it's about first identifying these loops, and then start trying to break them. So throwing new things at them to see what breaks them. Because not everything you throw at the first time will work. It might be, if I think playing video games is going to cause me this problem, I just stop playing video games completely. Did that help it? Yes or no? Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. If it didn't, what else can I do? And keep iterating until I get a higher and higher percentage rate of going through my days without using the shit. And it's an iterative process again. And, I'm not out here denouncing porn ever and claiming that this is the scourge of humanity. There are people out there who use this stuff healthily. The same way that I can drink a couple beers and not become an alcoholic, the same way some people can use porn a couple times a day and not fall into what you would call an addiction or a negative habit loop.
A reliance.
Exactly. So for me, it's about finding these habit loops. And, when you're using something like that since you're 9 or 10, you're going to have a lot of these loops. And just trying to break each and every one of them to the point that if I ever have to use this stuff, it has to be a very fucking conscious decision. That is a point where I want to get, where there are no longer these unconscious, I guess you call water slides, Every time you go through a habit loop and you let it complete, you're greasing up the slide. So next time it goes down much easier.
Mm-hmm.
Every time you're about to start a habit loop and you break it, that grease is drying off just a bit.
Dude, I never thought of that. That's very true. Yeah, it's like the path of, just as you create paths of least resistance, you are creating paths of harder resistance. Like if you don't have in your pantry, for example, your chocolate or whatever it is, you might kind of crave in that moment. If it's not there, you're kind of forced in a more difficult way to a healthier option. But do you feel kind of, I mean, you said you've been on that app for 8 months now. Do you feel proud of yourself or happy with where you are today, like in this very moment? Just for the sake of making progress?
It's hard because my gut answer is no. I wish I was further along. And I've said I've been trying to break this for 5, 6 years now. I remember my very first iteration was just literally a postcard where I wrote down the days and put a red dot whenever I was successful and just seeing how long it can go. And for everyone listening, I encourage you to try. If you're not really sure where you stand with this stuff, just go 7 days without using porn. If that sounds really easy to you, just do it. Go for it. Um, how that feels for yourself. And it might feel completely okay in that you don't even actually think about it. But for some people, you might realize that going 7 days is much harder than you thought. And that's maybe when you should ask yourself, hey, what's going on here? What's going on?
Yeah. But I mean, it seems like, from my perspective, obviously I'm not you, but you've become more candid about, just in general, you've become more candid about your addiction over the last year or two. I know that for a fact, and you've transitioned from the postcard to the app, and you've been doing this for 8 months straight, man. So you should be proud of the progress that you've made, and that's something that kind of I can't relate, obviously. Like I'm not. This is something that like you're dealing with, and I know I'm not gonna understand that, but um, if you're making progress, like you should be proud of yourself without, obviously breaking your momentum, but you deserve to pat yourself on the back a bit and be like, yeah, fuck yeah, I may not be where I want to be, but I sure as hell am in a more advanced position now than I was 2 years ago, and that's a win. That's the W right there.
So that's a great point you make. And in improv, this is what we call a callback to what I said earlier about pride. This is what the pride thing is all about, is me asking myself, am I proud of this? And my answers with my progress so far, I know I could have done much better. I know there are periods of my life where I was fully using it consciously and not recovering at the same rate I wanted to be recovering at. And that's the thing, right? Is something like pride as a pillar is something that other people can say, man, you're doing good. You should feel good about this. You should be proud. You should recognize the progress you made, which I absolutely do. I even have the fucking statistics to show myself. But that's not what it's about. It's about my own gut check. Do I feel like in that time I have given it what I could have in that time, right? And my answer to that is
the same kind of metric with every other part of your life. It's like, have I done everything I could have?
Overall for this, in the last year at least, there have been times where I didn't give it my all to recover. And that's not to say I'm not happy with the progress I'm making. That's not to say that I think that I'm hopeless or that this is a desperate situation. It's very much just that I know I could be doing this better. I know I could be paying more mind to it, and I'm just not at that rate where I want to be at yet. Now, this also goes into the other thing of, I think this is really important, is why am I so candid, or how have I become so candid about something like this over time? And I think it's recognizing where addictions like this hold the most power. And that power is in shame. The more you feel ashamed about yourself on something, the more anxious you get, right? That's the number one thing. And the more anxious you get, the more shameful you feel about yourself, the less you're going to be willing to talk to other people about it. The more you're going to want to hide it from the world. And the more you're hiding yourself from other people, from even the most meaningful relationships you have, the more, and this is for a lack of a better term, your soul rots away. And that's really dangerous. That soul rotting is what fuels the worst anxieties, the worst fucking panic attacks, the worst just mental anguish. And all that drives you back to one place, which is help me escape all this mental anguish, help me escape the soul rot, even if just temporarily. And you're going back to using. And that's such a dangerous cycle. And this is a cycle a lot of people who have this problem get into before they're even 18. By the time they're in senior year of high school, they've dug themselves in way too fucking deep. And the only way, and there is only one way to break out of the cycle, is to not give that shame its power and connect with others and be able to share what you're feeling. And recognizing that, holy shit, this giant thing in my head that's been eating me away for so long is something I can talk to people about, talk to people I trust about, or just talk to anyone about. And that at the end of the day, there will always be people who are like, LMAO, what? But then again, there will be those people for literally everything. So that doesn't matter. It's about finding the people that are like, you know what, man? I feel you. It's a good struggle. You're fighting. I support you. That kind of people, to find that kind of support in your life, matters so much. And for me to be candid is also part of me, I guess, giving back to the candidness that other people have shown me. Is maybe saying to whoever's listening out there, even if it's just one person who feels like they have a struggle in a similar way, that talking about it is the first step out of it. You know, talking about it to a therapist, even to a trusted friend, to just anyone, to even just a stranger that you'll never see again. That's the first step of realizing the hole you're in is actually not nearly as deep as you thought it was. That it might look bleak when you're at the bottom looking up, but, you know, with a determined will and knowing really how close you are to the surface, you can climb out of that hole easily. And it might take time. You know, it might take a lot of effort. It might not be as easy as you wish it was, but that's not to say it can't be done. So yeah.
Damn. That well, holy shit, Matt. That was I mean, that's a great way to kind of wrap up the discussion because we are running out of time here. But man, I appreciate you being candid so much. Like that's exactly what we're looking for. That's exactly what I'm trying to do here, and being willing to share your story and not let the kind of the addiction have that power of shame over you is fucking awesome, man. Like I'm so proud of you, and I'm like it's
That's what this is about,
that's
right?
fucking amazing.
This
I
is
love
what
you,
this
man.
is about.
But that is going to wrap up the first episode. Matt, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate the insightful conversation and kind of learning about your journey a bit. So thank you so much for sharing that. If you want to be on the show, if you think you'd be a good fit, immerweiter.com, check it out. There's a form on there if you have any feedback whatsoever that you'd like to share, you just want to get in touch. My contact is on the website as well, or you can just email me at mika@immerweiter.com. We're going to have an episode every Friday with some cool guests lined up. So thank you guys very much for tuning in, whether it be on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Music. And Matt, once again, man, I couldn't have asked for a better first, man. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you for having me. Absolute pleasure.